Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Apparently this is a one-speaker meeting. Hi, I'm Pete, alcoholic. Hi. Nice to be here. It's been a year since I was here, I think. I counted 50 people here when I got here, which is 45 more than there were last year when I was here, so Terry's doing a good job of... Way to go, Tara. I look a little different than I did last year. I had a falling out with my plastic surgeon friend that used to shoot Botox in my forehead, and now I got my wrinkles back, and I found out makeup on them pretty soon. I'm going to look like one of those Shar-Pei dogs, you know, and they'll say, who spoke? You know, that old guy. Oh, it's so nice to be here and to be with friends. I've known Jeannie for so long and Faith for so long, and we really have a wonderful fellowship and a wonderful way of life. And you don't have to be around a long time to get it. Like Dave is. How many years did you take a cake for, Dave? And one year? 2 years. 2 years. You know, it's a tough life, right, for you? So, I mean, it's pretty amazing, you know. God, I really don't have it in me for the protracted drunk-a-log tonight. Usually when someone says they're going to just skip the drunk-a-log, they get sobered about 5 minutes to 9. You know, they're like in 11th grade at 5 minutes to the... I'll do my best. I grew up back in Pennsylvania, and a little steel town, and it was just a great growing up, you know. My grandfather was the town doctor, and my grandparents on my mom's side were Russian immigrants, and I had all these aunts and uncles that lived all over up and down the street and across the bridge, and I slept at my cousin's house, and they slept at my house, and you know, I would have lunch at one aunt's and supper at another aunt's and midnight snack at my grandmother's, and you know, we rode our bicycles around till 10 at night and played soldier in the woods and swam in the creek, and the little town didn't have any crime. The New York Times Sunday Magazine did an article about it, you know, that never had any crime and no one locked their doors, and so I mean, that's just sort of where I grew up. We didn't have any secrets or any weird stuff. So there really isn't anything in my childhood to predispose me to alcoholism, except, well, first of all, the kind of kid I was a really scared kid. I always felt separate from the other kids and different from the other kids, and that the other kids were better friends with each other than they were with me. And I also was I always thought something bad was getting ready to happen, like always. It's just waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know, I would be in class, and the school nurse would whisper something to the teacher, and I was sure she told the teacher that they just found out I was terminally ill, and I would ask the kid in the front row, I'm going to die, aren't I? And the kid would just, what's wrong with you, you know? And I would sleep over at my friend's house, like you sleep over at your the parents would bring me home at 4 in the morning throwing up because you're staying 3 doors down the street. Created too much anxiety in me when I was 12 years old, you know, and we would go on vacations, and that would have to come. I'd get a pain in my side, and we'd have to come home, and they even took my appendix out in hopes that we could then go on vacations, but it didn't do any good. And I would stay at my grandfather's house. He was a widower, and he had a great big house, and I was scared to stay in the house by myself, so he'd have to take me along with him to the emergency room or on, you know, house calls, and I learned just enough about medicine to become a hypochondriac. So, you know, then I went to high school. It wasn't any better. I was like a social moron. You know, I had horn-rimmed glasses and braces, and I had a pocket protector before any of the nerd movies came out, before it was fashionable. And And I hung out with the really cool guys, but I wasn't one of the cool guys. You know, I was like a sidekick, like Patsy Weber or Ralph Mouth or something, you know. And so it was just more of the same, you know, more of like a feeling of, you know, a fish out of water. And so it came time to go away to college, and I told the guidance counselor, absolutely Miss Craig, you know, I wanted to go to school in Ohio. And she said, why do you want to go to school in Ohio? And she said, why? I said, because you can drink at age 18 in Ohio. And that seemed like, as all other things the same, good criteria. And the reason for this is, first of all, my brother went to college and law school before me with a beer in his hand and had a great time. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this little town I grew up in. It had about 5 steel mills or factories, maybe even more, and each steel mill or factory had 4 plant gates, 1 for each direction of the compass. And each plant gate had 3 bars on the corner of the crossment. So this little town of maybe 11,000 people had probably 50 taverns. So it should be a Guinness Book of World Records. And that's where life happened, you know. And it's 7 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon and 11 at night when the mill whistle blew. And everybody shuffled back and forth from the plant gate to the bar. I don't know when they went home, and that's where life happened. And I couldn't wait till I was old enough to go where life happened. My grandfather on my mom's side, who I was appropriately named after, always had a glow on, and he would take my cousins and me up to the Central Cafe, and we would sit on the stoop outside while he went in to get a shooter, you know, and Grandma would come by and would be like, oh, Grandpa just went in to use the phone, you know, and I always say I've been covering up for alcoholics ever since, mostly myself. And so everyone, my dad drank, my mom drank, my brother, my aunts, my uncles, our neighbors. The Lurches, our neighbors, they didn't drink, so we weren't allowed to play with their kids. Because they were freaks. And when they went places, Mrs. Lurch drove and Mr. Lurch sat in the seat beside her, and that was just some kind of cardinal sin in our little town. Probably went with the teetotaling or something. So I went to college, to this Methodist laundromat for unwashed minds over in Ohio, and in my freshman year I was just terrified, you know, I was just terrified. And I got good grades, and I pledged a fraternity, and I played sports, but the whole time I was just like I was from the time I was a child, you know, never felt connected, never felt part of, never felt at peace, you know. Then in the spring quarter of you all know what's going to happen now, in the spring quarter of my freshman year, I was with this guy named Steve Strong, and we went into Reed's bar, the college bar, which would become an important institution in my life. And there I met Eve, the barmaid, who would become an important figure in my life. We went in there, and there was Eve. You know, Eve was this platinum blonde, buxom. I mean, she was about 70. She used to be a stripper back in New Jersey or something. You talk about love at first sight. She said to me, what do you have, honey? And I said, why, I'll have a shot. Yeah, that's it, a shot. And she said, a shot of what? I said, a shot of gin. That's it, a shot of gin. And I had like maybe 10 or 12 of them, you know. So we're riding around the campus in this guy's car, and I'm throwing up out the window of his car, and I'm telling him, I'm asking him, can you see, aren't the stars beautiful? Can you smell the flowers? Isn't college great? You know, and you're the best friend I ever had. I knew this guy all of like a week, and I was euphoric, you know, and the only other time I'd ever been euphoric was when they took my appendix out and they prepped me with the Demerol. And I told the nurse, you have beautiful hair and beautiful hands. And I gave her my phone number. I was 15. That was pretty ominous. And I told the doctor when he came in, Dr. Gardner, thank you so much. Cut whatever you like. Just thank you, you know, And you know, so when I was in Reed's bar, it was like the second time in my life that I felt comfortable in my own skin. You know, the book of Alcoholics Anonymous says people drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And I love the effect produced by alcohol. I did not come to AA because I thought it was a virtue to be sober. I would still be drinking if I could. You know, I mean, you know, people are always like, wow, you know, 19 years of sobriety, aren't you wonderful? It's like congratulating someone with hemorrhoids for not riding horses for 19 years. You know, like, I mean, where else was I going to go, you know? I mean, yeah, I'm giving my, not that there's been much demand for it, but I'm giving my body to science when I die, and I like to be a fly on the wall over there at that lab in UCLA when they put my brain in the formaldehyde and the guy hears the So I was back on the bar stool the next night, and as my mom pointed out, who was paying the tuition, I managed to squeeze 4 years of college into 7 years. So in like my third senior year or something, I saw a George McGovern ad on TV, and I went to work for George McGovern, and I'd never been west of Ohio, and they sent me to Oregon. And from the time I was a little kid, I always wanted to be someone who hopped freight trains or went to sea or rambled around, you know, so I became like this migrant political and community organizer, and I just worked for different candidates and causes, and I worked in most of the 50 states, and it was like a drinking tour of America. And the thing with me is when I like what I'm doing and my life is okay, then I control and enjoy my drinking. And then when my life goes haywire, then my drinking goes haywire. And that's what happens to me. And then, so let's see, I ended up, we're pretty good BSers, you know, so at least I should speak for myself, I am. And you've probably already figured that out anyway. And I talked them into letting me manage political campaigns. So I would like run some guy for governor of Oregon and then run some guy for the U.S. Senate in Iowa and just go all around the country. And but my disease progressed like the book said, and I had lots of things. The first thing that happened, I was in this really bad bicycle accident in Virginia, and I smashed my head. And I had slurred speech and short-term memory problems, but nobody noticed, because when you're drunk all the time, you can't remember anything, and you slur your speech anyway. And then in the end, up in New Hampshire, I ended up in the hospital with alcohol poisoning or God knows what, you know, but there was this kind little doctor in Newton, Massachusetts, and he and his family took me in and tried to nurse me back to health, and after a couple months, they just gave up because I just was, you know, I was just tweaked, you know, and it was just alcoholism had taken its toll on me, and I came to California with my girlfriend / nurse named Mary, and because I was like scared to be alone and couldn't take care of myself almost, and I taught a little bit of political science at UCSB, but mostly I just laid around the beach, and I was scared, like if I left the apartment and went 1 block, I'd have to run back to the apartment. I was scared to just go out into the world, and if I had even a little bit of alcohol, I would get sick. So what I did was I worked hard to get my tolerance back so that I could drink 3 beers without getting sick. Well, who else but an alcoholic would do that? And the reason I did it was, I mean, you know, when we come here, we have to stop drinking because we have trouble with our physical health or mental health or our relationships or our job or the criminal justice system or all of the above. So we can't drink, but we can't not drink because we don't know how to live without alcohol. So that's like the rock and the hard place that we're between, and that's the rock and the hard place that I was between. So I got to the point where I could drink 3 or 4 beers without getting sick, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't scared anymore, and I was too important for Santa Barbara, and I moved to San Francisco, and I got 2 jobs, one as a firefighter for the city, and also another one running an animal welfare agency, and so we would rescue dogs and cats all day and people all night, and then go to the bar and drink and talk about it, and I was doing great again. And that's when my friend Art, then I met this girl named Amy, that's the part where my friend Art always made the sign of the cross, and Amy came to work at this animal welfare agency, and I was sort of attracted to her. It was like an affliction, you know, if I never feel like that again, it would be just fine, and we were, you know, roughly the same age. I was 33 and she was 18, and she was like between her freshman and sophomore years at Cal. And so it's time for her to go back to school, and she, for whatever reason, was having trouble seeing the future in our relationship. And so I didn't do anything any good alcoholic wouldn't do. I, you know, staked out her house to see where she was coming home, and staked out the guys' houses that she knew. And then I used to get drunk and visit her at work, and I think that's always a sign of caring when you do that. And I also used to call up her father in the middle of the night. He was president of the American Psychiatric Association, and he taught medicine at Stanford. He'd say, "Is this an emergency?" I'd say, "Yes, it is. Amy just left the bar with a coke dealer." He'd say, "Well, call back tomorrow, son." You know, and So I went down to Sunnyvale where they have George Jones on the jukebox, If Drinking Don't Kill Me or Memory Will, and I got drunk at her, and I didn't mean to, but I stayed drunk for 2 years, and I lost everything. I mean, I lost my job as a firefighter, I lost my job at the Humane Society, I'm now in my like 6th senior year at the University of San Francisco. I'm kicked out of there. I don't even have a place to live. All these bars around Stanford University, the bartenders sell both alcohol and cocaine, and wherever they work, regardless of where they work, they all lived in this one house in Menlo Park that looked like a haunted house, and they let me sleep on the floor there with a shaggy dog named Bob, and Bob didn't like sharing the floor with me any more than I liked sharing with him, and he would growl when we went to bed at night, and he smelled, and he would, and then at like 2:30 in the morning when the bars closed, these guys would all come home with all this booze and all this dope, and we'd just party all night, and I'd like come to in the morning, and I'd be like, wow, I'm way too coked up to sleep, but I'm way too tired from partying all night but I'm way, whatever that purgatory is, and I'd get up and I'd, try to find a can of beer that didn't have a cigarette butt in it, and I'd try to find a cigarette butt, in the ashtray. But when you snort cocaine all night, you're not very many long butts, and then you light it, and you gag because you're hungover and it's strong, and then I would go, and it would be like a sea of people laying in this room, and I would then go through everybody's pants pockets to try to find some change to go buy a beer and a pack of cigarettes. Oh, and the animal welfare agency I worked for was called Pets in Need, and everybody's nickname for me was called Pete's in Need, and I'd be like going down the street, and I would have like wet my pants, and some guy was trying to get out of the way to not be on the same side of the street as me, and he was hit by a car, and I told him, serves you right, I was only going to try to borrow $5, and I'd go into a bar, and the bartender would let me drink there for a couple of days, and I'd say, why don't you just go drink somewhere else? Or I would go into a bar, and the bartender would say, Amy, right? And I knew I'd been in, I'd just turn around and walk out, So I'd start going through everybody's pants pockets in the morning, and they'd be like, oh, that's probably just Pete's in Need going through our pants pockets again, And, I would rather be dead than to live like that again, to wake up like that every morning. There was a Pete's Coffee, and I used to go over there and get a cup of coffee, and I would go sit on this park bench, and it would be cold, and I would have, in those days, it only cost a dime to make a phone call. That's how old I am, and I would go to make a phone call, but, I couldn't think of one person to call. I did not have one person in my life. I didn't have a job, hope for a job, a friend, hope for a friend, a car. I mean, anything. I was just a lost soul, and then it got worse. Then I ended up homeless in Santa Cruz, and I was, I told my dog Zeke we were camping, but I was sleeping outside, and I was begging for food at the back door of restaurants and picking up cigarette butts off the street, and for a while I stayed in the St. George Hotel. The St. George Hotel was a luxury hotel when it was built during the Civil War, but not when I stayed there. And the whole thing, the Salvation Army pays your way, and the whole place is on a tilt, and you put an orange in the floor, it just rolls to the wall, and you walk to the men's room at the end of the hall like this, and my next door neighbor was Richard. He looked like Charles Manson, and he used to let me watch him shoot up. I was so fascinated by that, and he had coffee and peanut butter, instant coffee, and water was hot enough coming out of the spigots to make. When somebody has instant coffee, they're like rich when you're on the bum. And he had lived in Marin County for 20 years. I figured, hey, and I so finally asked him, Richard, where did you live in Marin County? San Quentin? I said, oh, I should have known that, So I have a cousin Eddie who lives in Berkeley, and well, now he lives in Oakland, but he always lived in Berkeley till his house burned down in the big fire, and he practiced law in San Francisco, and I was always close to him. I grew up next door to him, and I have a cousin Amy that's a lawyer in Santa Monica that practices. She's a judge now, but she practiced law downtown then, and we grew up the street from each other, and I was close to my mom and close to their moms, who are my aunts, and my mom and her two sisters and my cousins. They all maneuvered me onto a Greyhound bus in Oakland, where my cousin Eddie gave me 2 crisp $20 bills, which was the most money I had seen in like a year or something, and I got on the bus and came to LA and went to my cousin's house. It was a nightmare. I drank everything in her house and everything in her neighbor's house, and I had these 2 dogs that looked like ads from the Humane Society. They hadn't eaten I don't know how long, and my cousin's neighbors were Chinese, and my dogs would jump over the fence and steal their shoes and poop in their yard and bring their shoes back into my cousin's yard, and oh man, and she was so patient and wonderful. To this day she still says, I didn't mind having you, but I was a real handful, And so I decided, okay, enough of this, I'm going to stop drinking. And every day I would go out and look for a job, and I would be determined to look for a job and determined to not drink any alcohol. But if you gave me a lie detector test, it would show that to be the case, but I couldn't get past the first bar. And the book says that we know we shouldn't drink, but we see other people drinking with impunity, and we take a drink, and the phenomenon of craving occurs, and we pass through the well-known stages of a spree. We emerge remorseful, vowing to never do it again, and then we do it again. And everybody in this room is destined to die that way unless we find a spiritual solution to our disease. So now I'm drinking against my will, and I'm really scared, and I'm trying, and if I get a whole day, I'm despondent. You know, just make me depressed to not drink. So my mom sent $1,000 to either my mom or my Aunt Annie sent us $1,000 to my cousin's house for me to move out of, and my cousin went to La Costa for the weekend with her boyfriend, and I had the house to myself, and I thought, you know, I wouldn't need this whole $1,000 to move out of my cousin's house, so I had a moving out party, and I had Tanqueray gin, and I had, I wasn't dating a lot, so I got a couple of dates out of the Yellow Pages, and I had, like, you know, a moving out party. And in the morning, I only had like 30 cents left of the $1,000. Oh, my cousin's gonna kill me, you know. And you know that the feeling that you have when you just expect to be told you always screw up, you know. And so the next morning, I had the worst hangover I ever had, and I was so sick, and I thought I was gonna die, and I called to send AA. I didn't know who else to call. I got down, oh, this is important. I got down on my cousin's kitchen floor in her little breakfast nook, and I asked God to help me, and I had never done that before, and I got up and I called, I didn't know who to call, and I called AA. And they said, we'll have someone call you, and about a minute later the phone rang, and it was Jim Barracks, and he said to me, do you have a problem? And I said, yeah, I have a problem. And he said, oh, where do you live? I said, I live on 10th Street in Santa Monica. He said, so do I. And he picked me up in about 5 minutes, and he took me to the Marina Center. And in those days, they had a restaurant upstairs, and they bought me dinner, and they bought me a big book, and I don't remember a thing that the lady was talking about at the meeting, but I know that when we were holding hands and saying the Lord's Prayer, I started to cry, and I hadn't cried in years, and I just knew I was all done. You know, it was just amazing. And if you had all come out on a bus the night before, I wouldn't have come with you, but that day you couldn't have denied me entrance. You know, maybe I needed every drink that I took, but it's remarkable the transformation that happened, and I've never had a craving since in the 19 years since. Just amazing. So anyway, I got the job. I used to say the third step prayer over and over and over again, and Ronnie Weber was my first sponsor, and he made me get all these commitments, and I had the coffee pots, and my cousin lent me this car, and the brakes went out in the car, and I was afraid that maybe she'd take it away from me, so I didn't tell her the brakes went out, so I was stopping it with a parking brake, and all 5 coffee pots from Sunny Ohio Street are rolling around the car, and I'm stopping it with things, and I got all the jobs that you get when you're new. Like Ronnie made me get a job with this tree trimmer. I didn't know he was there on a court card, and I went into the laundromat, and he was drunk, and he took me out, and he just goes, just cut any limbs off that tree, you know, and he had these 2 prostitutes that raked the leaves, and my job was to take them to the methadone clinic at noon every day with the parking brake and the coffee pots and you know, and then I got the job in the boiler room for the AA guru, where you just call some lady in Florida and tell her, you know, I'd like to send you a small office pack, 4 million pens, you know, that have a shelf life of about a week, you know, and so my cousin I hadn't found it necessary to drink, but I hadn't really found it necessary to work either. And so I ended up leaving there and going, and I went over to stay at the Clare Foundation. I was so crazy. I mean, I was just so nuts when I was new. I remember when I took a 60-day chip at 26 and Broadway, I gave a rousing 20-minute address, and it took an astronaut, Buzz A, to talk me safely down into my seat, and he said to me, I hope I'm not here when you get 90 days. I said, I hope you're not either. What the hell have you ever done, you know? And have a lot of humility when we're new. People are like, oh, we had so much fun when we were new. Oh, sure. Just like getting a root canal is fun. So there at Clare, I got on my knees in the bathroom, and I asked God for them to take me in because I didn't want to be homeless again. And I came out, and that's where I met this man, Arthur East. He ran the place. He was about 75 years old, real dapper, had a full head of silver permed hair and a neckerchief, and wore a nice sport coat, and always drove a new car and jingled his keys. And he was an old mobster. He had worked for Meyer Lansky for years, and he was sober a long time. and he said, well, if you're going to live here, you might as well know where the coffee is, because that's how Art was. He always knew what to say, and they didn't have any beds, so he let me sleep on the sofa in his office for a few months, and every morning he'd wake me up jingling his keys. Mr. Pete, time to get up, you know, and he taught me stuff, you know. If you want to have a good sobriety, mind your own business, you know. You want to be happy. Happiness is just a byproduct of love and service. And it'd say, you need a job. So he got me a job working in a liquor store. And then about a year later, you need a better job. So he got me a job in charge of fundraising and public relations for Claire Foundation. And you need a car. He gave me his mother-in-law's old Ford. And I'd run out of gas at 2 in the morning, and without any money, he'd come out at 80 years old with a gas can, and I'd be all embarrassed, and he'd say, well, that's what friends are for. Now, I wanted to be like Art. I rented this house down in Hawthorne, and I took all these newcomers in, and they burglarized the neighbors and caught the place on fire and overdosed and had psychiatric emergencies. But I stayed sober, you know. But Art was in Santa Monica Hospital, and he would call me. He would say, the nurses don't know how to fix my pillows. And I would go and I would just fix them 2 one way and 2 the other. And all he really wanted to do was to see me, you know. And the day that he died, there was this little street drunk named Kenny that Jeannie and Faith and all of us knew. And he was sober at the time. He later died on my front lawn of our disease. But we were there with Art when he died. And Art said to me that he helped thousands of guys like he helped me. Thousands. And the day that he died, he said, you know, Pete, you're my best friend. And you know, that's the kind of stuff that we get. I mean, come on, I mean, nobody really gives a damn how long you're sober for, how many people you sponsor or anything else. You know, I really think that when we get sober, it's a big deal, and I think when we die, it's a big deal, and I think everything else is just sort of smoke and mirrors, and what we really have here is a love that we get to share with each other and the help that we get to extend to each other. And that's where we find the real meaning. I was thinking when I was, Jeannie, once I was at a meeting, and there's this guy gave this great talk, and just at the end of his talk, he said, oh, by the way, I was diagnosed with lung cancer, and I'm not supposed to live more than 6 more months, but, you know, we'll see. And I was so impressed that this guy had so much courage to give such a good talk facing that, you know. So I gave him my card, and I said, if you ever need anything, you call me. And sure enough, a week later, he needed a couple $100 or something, you know. And he ended up in the VA hospital, and there were a whole bunch of, I went to see him there, and there were a whole bunch of other guys there that had the same sort of relationship that I had. And so every night we went and we sat with Terry, and I would take him, his name was Terry Hart, and I would take him to meetings with me when in his pajamas, and he would always be a big fan and like to hear me speak. And the guys that took care of him, we're great friends forever. You know, and one time I remember he was on a lot of pain medication, and they went out to some house, Jeannie, and on Thanksgiving he put like a trunk of a tree in the fireplace, and ended up having to call the fire department, you know, all the stuff, Terry. But he was a wonderful example of our program, and when we took his ashes up to San Lorenzo where we have the retreat. And there were like a few of us, and one person had Terry's ashes, and another person had a picture of Terry, and another person had some flowers, and I was carrying something, and the brothers were there, Brother Peter and Brother Jared, and they had on their, like, you know, their robes with their rope belts, and there were lots of dogs, and we walked up tall hill where all the priests are buried, up to the top of the hill through the high grass with the dogs loping beside us. And we got to the top, and Brother Peter had the massive Christian burial, and he read, and we buried Terry's ashes. And Brother Peter said, you know, he said, I watched how you fellows took care of Terry. And he said, you know, we priests need inspiration. And what I've learned from you has inspired me to be a good priest for another year. You know, and these are all I spoke at the Solano Club down in Newport Beach a month ago, and behind the podium they have a concrete block wall, and every block is about 3 inches by 6 inches, and everybody has their name on the wall, you know, and some people have their full name like Charles Wisniewski, and some people just have a nickname like Serenity Sally, and when the person dies they just put a little in memory of over their name, and about half of the people on that wall just says in memory of. And I looked at it, and it was just the tapestry of the humanity that is that club. You know, and I just thought, you know, how we spend all our time thinking that we need to have this and we need to have that, and really all we really need to have is a good relationship with God and each other. So anyway, I got Howard P. to be my sponsor because Ronnie Weber said he couldn't do it another day, and I wrote volumes of an inventory, and Howard knew he was in trouble when I asked him to help me carry it upstairs, and I read it for hours, you know, and he'd nod off, you know, and you did what? I said, I slept with his wife. Yeah, don't do that again. He'd nod back off again, you know. And Howard's been a wonderful sponsor for me. I mean, I'm really a product of Howard, you know. He has been meditating, and so let's see, what else can I tell you about my life today? When I was new, I was in a meeting and I was complaining, and some guy said to me, hey, you see that sidewalk square you're standing in? I go, yeah. All you got to worry about is what's inside that square. I said, you don't understand. Bob asked Joe for a cigarette, and he, not in your square. Just worry what's inside your square. And I try to mind my own business today, and I have, you know, running all of West LA was a big job. You know, you have to worry about, you know, I mean, she shouldn't marry him because he hit her, and he shouldn't work for him because he doesn't pay him enough, and they're identifying as addicts from the podium. They're not washing the men's room at the Marina Club, and, you know, I mean, there's lots to be in charge of. And then one day, you know, I just resigned. I just retired, and I've been happy ever since, you know, and occasionally I'll bump into somebody that has my old job of running West LA, and they're no happier than I was, and no one likes them any more than they like me, you know, and what else? I think I think if you're going to live a spiritual life, have to give up the popularity contest. Not everybody's going to like you, you know, so what? And I mean, of course, everybody in this room, we're all really nice and healthy, but not everybody in AA is really, you know, entirely healthy, and it's not such a terrible insult to be disliked by some of these people, especially if you're active, you know. I meditate every day. Howard has me meditating. I go in the backyard, and when I inhale, I say the Spirit of God surrounds me. When I exhale, I say when I inhale, I say the Spirit of God fills me. When I exhale, I say the Spirit of God surrounds me, or the Spirit of love. And that's really good for me. And then I say to myself that the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are the salvation of the goodness that is my life. The steps of AA are the salvation of the goodness that is in my life, and that's true. And Howard, I mean, the way I look at our disease is that when we were drinking, we couldn't stop drinking, and we asked God for help, and we stopped drinking, and we stayed sober. And then the other problem is, as it says in the book, that we don't think that alcohol is our problem, that selfishness and self-centeredness, this we think is the root of our problems. And not so much selfishness, because I'm not a very selfish person, but I'm a self-centered person. What does self-centered mean? Not being able to see anything except from my own point of view. I just can't ever see anyone else's point of view. It's like Pete's World, you know. It's like I'm trapped in a horrible soap opera called Pete's World, you know. And what happens is I love you, and I want what's best for you, and I want what's best for everyone. So I hope that you'll do certain things, and then when you don't do them, I get sore, and I stay sore, and I am powerless over that. I can't take that away. Only God, and I have to have God take that away from me, and then I can have a happy life, and only then, you know, because the alcoholic is always operating in a state of low-grade alert. Is this outcome favorable to me or not, you know? And I'm going to shut up in a second. Howard had this vision once that he was walking across a frozen lake, and it all came to him that when we take the third step, it's like walking on a frozen lake, and how thick the ice is really determined by how well we did the second step. And if we have lots of faith, you know, then life's a happy escape. But if we don't, then we're always waiting to fall through the ice, you know. And then so he thought that his depression was related to his lack of faith. And he always used to say that if Pat just promised him that she'd never leave him, you know, and if he'd just get that promotion at Hughes and the title, and if they just had a couple of months of the mortgage in the bank, then he'd feel okay, but he didn't feel good anyway. And he reminds me when he calls me, especially when it's some relationship thing or something, he says, that good feeling that you want to have, that feeling of peace and safety and love and just the feel good that you're looking for. Not anything that anybody is going to say. There's nothing anyone's going to say or anything is going to do to give you that. But when you put your faith in God's hands and come from there, then you can have all those other things, and it's all just fun and games. And So I stay active. I go to a Tuesday night workshop. We just work the steps over and over again. I think it was Don Gates that used to always say, if you're in AA and you're not working the steps, you're probably not having a very much fun, you know, and that's really true. So anyways, I think the whole thing with me is Howard always tells me that the universe knows what I need, and the universe will provide for me what I need, and all I need to do is to just show up every day, do what's in front of me, and do it as best I can and as lovingly as I can, and that everything that I need will come to me, and everything that I need will come to me, that all the stuff that I would try to manipulate for myself out of fear, you know, that I will do better than that. And I had this, I'm going to read something, I'm going to sit down. This guy, Neil Donald Walsh, he writes all these books, Conversation with God and stuff, and this was a book called Friendship with God. And I met a woman in Carson City, Nevada, while gambling, who worked in a brothel, who gave me this book. So it just goes to show you that, you know, out of the mouths of babes, she was a babe too. Actually, it was so interesting. We were at this bar, and she went out to her car, and I know that's what she did for a living, and she told me later, and she brought this book and she gave it to me. And anyway, she had underlined some things in it, and it's the same things that Howard underlined. So we don't really have a corner on the spiritual market. And so this guy's talking to God, and he says to God, and so for a person of elevated consciousness, outcomes and results are always intended and never unanticipated. That's true, says God. And the degree to which a result appears unanticipated is a direct indication of the level of consciousness at which an experience is being perceived. Precisely correct. So the master is one who always agrees with results, even if they do not appear favorable, because he knows that on some level he must have intended them. And that is why the master sees everything as perfect. He or she has no doubt that on some level he is responsible for the result. And that is why the master never sits in judgment of another person, place, or thing, because he put it there, and he's aware that at some level he created what he is experiencing. And that condemnation has no part in this process. Indeed, that which you condemn, you keep in place. We are, all of us, exactly where it is perfect for us to be all the time. And we need nothing more for our evolution than exactly what we have and are experiencing right now. And if we don't need anything, then we don't have to trust God. And when we don't have to trust God, then we actually can. Because trust then means not having to have a particular result, but rather knowing that whatever results is for our highest good. So thanks for listening to me, and God bless you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.